In 13 was a little high compared to what we normally run into, why kids retake it. So that kind of give you a little synopsis of what could make up the graduate score.
So now this, so then what you're, so this right now, this 20.2 composite score,
Mhm.
this is based upon the kids right now that are in college.
1 year out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So then what you were just referring to was actually, that would have impacted this. So like our school performance report card, they took the test last spring in January, or in last spring in like April.
Our current seniors.
Yeah. So, and then after that, there are 13 of them that have retaken the test
Yeah.
and moved their score.
Mhm.
And that will end up counting in this report.
So when we see this
But
a
it
year
won't be
from
in
now,
this report.
no, it won't be in what you're gonna see.
Yeah.
And obviously, the ACT is designed that, yes, 11 improved, it's gonna move it, it could move it a decimal. You know, the ACT, due to its standardization, is not designed to fluctuate. If you look at the composites, the state average over the years, other than when they changed who's taking the test and how they delivered it, you're pretty consistent that the ACT for years hovered right at that 22.2. Very rare that it move.
Yeah, what he's referring to is when I hit the 20.5, that's when all kids take the ACT. It used to be that way. So, okay, so to me, that's good news. That's a good trend.
Yeah, because what we like to see is we want to create the profile of what our graduate looks like. And this is a piece of that, along with other things that we can provide, from school to work experiences to volunteerism to things like that. So we're more than a score, but this is an important score. And I think the other quick thing we can speak to is that on the bottom of the page, and this is pretty predictable from year to year, they set college benchmarks. Our goal is to get, obviously our ACT goal is to get at or above the state average again. And then also the coursework down below, it's kind of self-fulfilling on the back sheet as well as the bottom half of that first sheet, is that the more advanced coursework you take, the chance of meeting the benchmark, or on the back sheet, exceeding your average score is pretty predictable. So the more math you take, for example, your math score should increase. What we found over the years, though, is this is simply dependent on how the kid or the student fills out their ACT form. So this is not anything that is exact data. It is what the kids provide. And for the most part, it's pretty right on, but it could fluctuate a little based on what the kids put in.
So how would there be anybody who takes 3 years of math?
Pardon me?
How will there be anybody in the future who takes less than 3 years of math?
In the future, none.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But don't forget, this is the ACT that we're talking about here also does not include the writing. And that's kind of the other quick snippet for our ACT, is that when Wisconsin uses the ACT for the report card, and our district and our building report card, the writing portion is taken as part of that test, as is science, which really corresponds with reading and content. The report card looks for math and reading achievement. The graduate score includes all the areas, but not writing. And most universities right now are not expecting or asking for the writing to be taken. So,
Well, that just leads into our next step.
yep.
Okay.
And then a couple more things quickly. National Honor Society banquet will be Sunday, December 16th. We will bring out invitations for the board at our first December meeting. But if you want to kind of mentally write down December 16th at the golf course, starting at 6 o'clock. Board members and their spouses are invited to join us. It's a nice program that Mrs. Nennig puts on. Our girls basketball team got their first victory. First game of the season was last Friday night. They beat Campbellsport. We also held Parents' Night that night. It was a good evening. The day before, we hosted our fall solo ensemble for vocal participants. Just a quick highlight is that of the 15 Class A pieces that were performed, 14 out of 15 received the requisite score to make it to the state solo ensemble. So that was a great start for our music program. in addition to all the other kids that have participated. We also had a Pops concert last week, Monday. Dave, you can speak to that. Good concert. I was not
It
able
was
to
an
attend.
outstanding concert, very good concert, very entertaining, and all the kids seemed very upbeat about it. And when there were some oops, the kids just followed right through and kept plugging away at it, so it was really very well done.
Yeah, and that kind of kicks off the soul ensemble and the Pops concert kind of kick off our concert series or season, because we've got a vocal and instrumental for our Christmas concert in December. Then we hop into the show choir season, musical to follow, spring concert, so now we're kind of off and running for the music kids. Last Tuesday, we had our parent engagement event for parents of students with disabilities. We provided information on the IEP process and what it takes to have a right college and career-ready IEP. Lisa Heim, Renee Renderman, Kara Amundsen, and Tim Baruch should be thanked because they did a lot of the work behind the scenes. Now, when I give you the number, don't be disappointed. We had 6 parents show up. However, we tried this a year ago and we had nobody show up, so I'm taking the 6 to be very interested. We also had numerous requests for the information from parents that weren't able to be with us that night. So it was really a good opportunity. We provided childcare for the parents that needed that, because we want to make this really user-friendly for our parents. And the nice thing was we had parents from every building attend. So it was a nice, about 50-minute presentation when it was all said and done, with questions and answers, and we had some time to get to know each other. The next event for our parent engagement will be the evening of December 13th. For these parents, as part of our elective night at the high school, we'll be talking about transition. And transition for special ed students is anyone who turns 14 during the IEP year. We start writing specific goals for life after high school. So that on December 13th will be our next parent engagement night as part of a high school event. I think I covered everything. Thank you, Mr. Westphal.
Okay, thanks, Nick.
All right. Next.
Next.
Okay, so we created a presentation, school performance report card that came out last week, 13th, in public. And prior to there were embargoed, so we could not talk about them, right? So this is our first opportunity where we're all in one spot to talk about this year's report card based upon the 2017-18 data resources for the state of Wisconsin. And we're gonna get started. So we've got the overall district report card. It's a one-page summary on the front. On the back is kind of a layman's terms. This is what it's all about. But we have a presentation for you tonight to help tell our story and what we're up to. Last week, when we met, I think it's very important to know the priorities of the school district. You're going to see them come up over and over again in the work that we're doing. We're aware of some of our challenges and our alignment with the school performance report card, and we've made a lot of adjustments already this school year in order to address it. So, here we go.
So, Scott will get into the specific score in a couple slides from now, but I just simply wanted to remind you that each fall, and this goes back quite a while, is that the Office of Educational Accountability issues report cards of accountability for all schools in a district as well as the district itself. And then these state assessments include relationships with families, teachers, districts, school boards. We get a snapshot of how well we're doing. And as we work through this, we spoke today about what we're really trying to do, is we've got to get away from the autopsy look at data versus the proactive approach. It's very easy to look back afterwards, and I think Scott just made a good point of this, is that we were already on this last spring into the summer. We knew where this was headed. We started to look at the internal data, and pretty predictable from the internal data without having the state tell us where this was gonna head. The measurement is basically the ACT in grade 11 in reading and math, the forward exam and the grades that you see there, and then the dynamic learning maps. And what the dynamic learning maps, the DLM, are an alternate assessment for students with significant disabilities, normally 2 standard deviations of grade level below, plus other impact that their impairment may have. What we are required to do is that we need to keep the number of students in dynamic learning maps at about 1% or less. That is a state expectation, that we don't test more using that alternative assessment than we have to.
So while it's an option, it's really limited. And if you were to have more than 1%, take the test.
What we have to do is we have to fill out an assurance page back to the DPI, making sure the kids that took the DLM were the correct kids. Do our teachers know how to identify kids, and what are we going to do moving forward? It is possible to be over 1% because you may get a fluctuation in enrollment, but the idea is you really want to keep it at 1% or less. The measurement itself, excuse me, for the juniors, the ACT is a test that's traditionally been used for the college acceptance and a predictor of college success. However, for the state of Wisconsin, we do use it for the juniors, and for good or for bad, it is a single shot in a day in February based on that single day of the test. However, moving forward, starting next year, we will have an achievement score for 9th graders, 10th graders, and 11th graders, okay? And then we will have a growth score for this year's, when I say next year's report card, but this year's juniors will have a growth score because we now have 3 years of ACT Suite data. So the juniors this year will have an achievement and a growth. Sophomores and freshmen will have an achievement, okay? So you understand that? And then we talked about what the Wisconsin Forward exam. The thing to remember there is we measure achievement in grades 3 through 8, okay? It's no longer a moving target. It used to be the Badger exam, and then it was the Forward exam, and then they kind of shifted how they would test and how they would assess. But basically, we do now know that the Forward exam is what it is. It's not going to change. We know the format of the questioning, and that's why I think the work that we're doing with our targets and standards tied back to that is pretty important. For the report card weighted formula, this is how when you get to the report card page, which is our next slide, this is the typical how the percents are divided between student achievement. So if you take our district score, 50% of the 25% student achievement, 25% student growth, and then the closing the gaps is 25%, and on-track readiness is 25%. Now those may be split, and I think I've got those.
Yeah, we'll have them on the next slide.
Okay, we've got them on the next slide. On how they're divided, and then I'll give you some definitions so you understand, because they're not all the same for all districts. So if you took Nicolay, Mayville, Horicon, Kohler, it's all different based on the demographics of our kids, and I'll explain that in a minute. And that's always important to know, because when you look at comparables, how are you comparing? So this is our front page of our district report card, and when you look at student achievement is basically that. English language arts and math, simply based on those two scores from tests, the Forward and the ACT, okay? The points displayed are weighted so that the larger number of students in more recent years contribute more to the score for the priority year. And basically, when we're looking at, I have a 3-year running total, I guess I would call it, and that if you want a copy of the complete report card, I can give that to you, and you can look at what the 3-year movement is. So basically, that the 17, 18 kids are in there now, then the next year we'll add the 18, 19, and then when they add the 18, 19, it must be the 15, 16 group gets kicked out. So you can understand that.
So it means if you have one data point where you're like, oh, that did not go the way we would like, they're going to carry that for 3 years.
Yeah, and what they're working on now, though, is your more recent and larger get a little more attention. So they're trying not to be punitive, that if you've got that bad one hanging out there, the further you get away from that score, the less impactful it is. But it is only 3 years.
And larger means if you have 120 students in a class versus 75 in a class.
Yeah.
They're not equal. The 125, that larger class has
Yeah,
more weight.
with more priority. When we talk about student growth or district growth, okay, Basically, what we're doing is we're evaluating district and its student growth over time compared to growth of similar students in Wisconsin. Okay, it's not to ourselves. So you may take a demographic group in Mayville and we compare them to that same group across the state. And the state has been able to calculate based on that group's achievement and growth over the years compared to what our achievement or growth should be compared to those rest of those groups. Okay, and really what they're trying to do is that when we want achievement and growth, we need it for all kids, not just a certain population. Okay.
I'm just gonna add.
Yeah, feel free.
Because really, that's where the discussion about equity comes in, and the changing demographics of Mayville. And, you know, using terms like getting in front of it, being a part of it, looking at the data and really owning the data there. Because when you look at the score, you see a lower number than state average. So we are digging in, just so you know, and we are aligning our work, and Carrie will speak about it. We are aligning our learning targets with the state report card because we believe it matters, right? So when we align that work, what we're doing is we're looking at our subgroups and we're looking at it and saying, okay, how are students of this background doing on this test? So when Lee said, hey, it's a comparison of our kids to other similar students in the state of Wisconsin, we're talking socioeconomic, special education, and like EL. Those would be the topics that we're looking at. So we need to look at all of our data through that lens. How are our English language learner students doing? How are our socioeconomically challenged students doing? And how are our special education students doing? Period. In addition to everything else, we have to do that, moving ahead all the time.
And they may not all have the same growth factor. You may have one demographic group that may have a value add of 1.7. You may have another group that has a value add of 2.2 based on our demographics. And a lot is driven, when you talk about the weighting of the report card, a lot is driven off the percent of economically disadvantaged. And that's where we start to break it out, where each performance by a subgroup on ELA or reading may have a 6% value or what have you. When we talk about closing the gaps, basically it's the rate of change in student achievement and graduation over time among key student groups. Okay, and then the on-track and secondary readiness is basically the state has identified benchmarks, as I will call them. Graduation, attendance, third grade ELA, and eighth grade math are considered milestones in the state of Wisconsin. And at that point in the time, third and eighth grade, as well attendance and graduation, those factor into the on-track and post-secondary readiness. For Mayville High School, for example, we have a graduation rate that is weighted at 20%, where some schools may have attendance rated at 10% and graduation rated at 10%. So once again, not all schools are comparable that way. And then the priority weights, okay, each of the driven categories weight is driven by the district's, as I said, number of economically disadvantaged. So for example, we are at 28.9, I believe, of for economically, 29.8. So basically that weights to some degree how we want to move those kids and other demographics. If you get a district who is in that 0 to 5% of economically disadvantaged, their achievement is weighted because they're not trying to move those other groups. Conversely, if you're on the far end, if you're into that 70 to 80% of economically disadvantaged, your achievement does not receive weight because they're trying to move the other demographic groups. And there's a nice, on the DPI website, there's a nice little formula where you can plug in your expected rate and almost predict what your percents are. So like the forward, the report card itself, we know the measures that they're looking for, we know what kids are in those groups, and we can go after those now. Any questions on what I quickly, I don't mean to go so fast.
A whole bunch more comments.
And if there's other times where you as a board member or a group, I know we don't want to have a quorum, but if you want to do the sit down and we go through this together, Carrie, I, or Scott are all able to do that with you. Because there's a lot of stuff here once you get into the full.
One, some districts have actually hired like a deeper level of analytic staff looking at data. So they actually have like a staff member, that is their job, to look at data. So we are meeting on Wednesday of this week to go through our Skyward data and how it syncs with Wise Dash. So there's Wise Data / Wise Dash. Well, our school information system talks back and forth all the time now. It used to be minimal, so now there's it's live. So we need to make sure that our data is migrating up the way it should to the DPI, because it does have an impact on a report like this. So a good example would be is we had some people that left the school district, they moved out of the school district, they showed up as non-graduates, like a dropout, based upon how the report was. So we worked on it, we believe we have it cleared up, but it definitely put us in like, well, hold on a second here, no. So we need to make sure how we exit students out of the system aligned with the codes from the DPI. So it's just, it's very new in general to us, some of the changes that have happened. Not a report card, but this piece has been a moving target until just the last couple of years. It started to stabilize.
I think Scott makes a good point about that data now. If you have a small error, it won't move this at all, but where we really want to be important and clear on this is that once we make the moves in growth, gaps, and achievement that we have to make, those little things almost become gravy then, because they won't nick away at a little piece here. So really, it turns into, you got to get your data cleaned up in the system correct, because it is a live daily poll.
What's in that absentee rate?
Absentee rate, I think it's the 13%, Dick, if I remember right.
Yeah.
And that's something we're talking about Wednesday too, because there's two ways to calculate absenteeism within the school district. And obviously, we don't have any deductions there, and what you don't want to do
Is that 13% every day?
Here's the good news, I didn't get an email saying that we had attendance issues.
Yeah.
Last year I did, it was how we were coded, is what it came down to.
Yeah, we don't.
So we were using different codes, the DPI wanted specific codes to be used, and we weren't using them. And many schools in this area all received this warning, your attendance is awful report. So we fixed the codes. It's really
and we're gonna, it's not only the codes, but this Wednesday will also, to Dick's point, is that we now have to determine how Wise Dash pulls. Wise Dash can pull by individual student, so Joe might have a 13% absenteeism rate, and as a group we don't, we still could get nicked for Joe. That's what we want to try to figure out, if it's individual.
But that seems awful high.
It is awful high, but I,
pool, larger district, you aren't affected as much as.
yeah, and I think to your point is that it seems high, but when you get into the Milwaukee, Green Bays, Madisons, and Milwaukee, it'd be shocking to know that
Well,
it's
that's,
exceeding it.
if you're less than that, you're okay.
Yeah, we're less than
That's
that,
what
okay.
it's about. Okay, I thought we were 13.
No.
But the way the
less.
formulas work though, something happened with our student data, and we ended up getting a super group that was measured at the high school.
Yeah, and that's one thing when you're looking at district growth and gaps. For example, quickly, and I don't know if you're gonna get into this intricate, Scott, but our district growth right now at the high school, we had no growth score. So your district growth score on this report card is a middle school growth score, okay? Your closing gaps is a combination of middle school and high school, and then moving forward, we'll have all this between the buildings. And what Scott is referencing is that as they look at the demographics and how you're doing, the all means all, is that if you don't have enough single students in the demographic group, they'll roll you up into another group, and if you still don't have, they'll roll you up to another group. So the three demographic groups that Scott mentioned earlier, at the high school last year, we had a super group of 3 demographic groups, and that super group was not making the gaps.
Yeah, when you take
advances
the
that we
special
wanted.
education, EL, and socioeconomic, put them all together in a super group, and that's what is now being measured, because we didn't have enough of any of them individually.
Yeah. And we have to be very conscious of how we teach and who we teach, and like I said, the all means all, that all kids need to have that, you know, so.
Okay, so this is, as far as, we thought it was important to share with you where we've been. So these report cards, they are measuring the same type of data. Prior to this, it was kind of a moving target. So we did get an overall district score of 67.5, meets expectations. The middle school received a 68, our high school got a 58.3 meets field expectations, and it was based upon that super group piece. So it was a drop in math achievement at the high school, okay? Which and Carrie's gonna speak to the changes. We've already made some changes, you just can't make it quickly enough is the thing, just so you